You know, China has lifted 850 million people out of poverty, which is hugely helpful to the rest of the world. So that was a good trend. As we stand now, there are parts of their economy that are state-dominated, many parts that have subsidies, and so as they could compete fairly, that helps the rest of the world. Can I make one other point, Joe?
Please.
That when people talk a lot about international trade or tariffs, for most countries, the internal trade, the commerce that they have between businesses, between one town and another, is even more important than their international trade. So I'd like to see a lot of focus on how do you allow businesses to exchange goods and to complete a contract. That oftentimes is the critical thing in getting more growth.
Kelly was just showing me where negative interest rates are around the world. What is happening? And you could have been on the Fed. You could have been like a Fed head at some point. Can you tell us?
Still could be.
Still could be. Where are we? What's going on?
So one thing going on is prices are pretty stable around the world, and inflation is pretty low, which invites investment.
Can you tell us why? Yeah, so
why
is it innovation? Is it a savings glut? Is it demographics?
Now, I do have strong views on that inflation usually comes from too much money. And so in the 70s, remember what the U.S. was doing was spending money both and in the 60s on guns and butter, on military and on social programs at the same time. And so that was not a helpful, workable strategy.
And that's different today? It is, with $22 trillion and with central banks and QE infinity and these low rates. It seems like we ought to have
dollar deficits.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it's ripe for inflation. Why are we here?
I want to go to developing countries. A lot of them have made remarkable strides in stabilizing their own situation and bringing inflation down, and that's the building block for more investment. And so I think we can focus on that from central banks doing good jobs. You have the chance to create an environment that allows a lot of growth. That's what we're working on in Egypt, or we aspire to in Pakistan, where they've had a big problem with devaluations, with weakness of currency, and with high inflation. If you can break that spiral, then you can get a better life. India, think about that, of over 1 billion people that are operating with an actual currency that functions and that is dependable, somewhat dependable for the people. Those are big achievements.
So the most important thing for the entire globe is growth. Are you optimistic that we're in a good growth environment? We have things set up well?
No, I'm optimistic about people and about if there are good policies, you can get ahead. That I think is true. But global growth has slowed. We lowered our forecast to 2.6% early in June, and in particular, Europe has slowed quite substantially. And so, from the standpoint of developing countries, that has a negative impact because they're physically, many of them are close to Europe, and also investment in developing countries has slowed, which is a problem for the future.
They're playing us out, but I have one World Bank sort of out of left field question, because we've been talking about Bitcoin all morning. So many of these developed countries, or developing countries, that's where people are using Bitcoin. But there's also a question of whether governments ultimately are going to clamp down on this. What do you think is going to happen?
So also they're using mobile banking, and that's been a liberating factor for a lot of people.
Right.
And it depends on the different systems in different countries. If the governments allow it, you can get a lot of financial inclusion.
What's your long-term handicapping of this? Because the one thing that countries have historically had a monopoly on is currency, and I don't know how quickly they're going to want to give that up.
I'm not sure Bitcoin or blockchain is as important as the liberalization of an internal market that allows people to hold money of real value.
David Malpass, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.